Oh, not this terrible thing again.
It's not that terrible. Oh, yeah.
The Vikings are known as being marauders and pillagers, but they also had amazing skill at building and sailing ships. The Vikings developed a very simple yet seaworthy ship design that was so effective it allowed them to sail great distances, even all the way across the Atlantic. The model that I made is of the Skuldelev 5 warship, an actual Viking warship found near Skuldelev in Denmark. Almost an entire half of the boat was found, so archaeologists could make authentic plans of one side and then duplicate it for the other. Also, the Skuldelev 5 was used as the base for a full-size replica called the Helga Ask. The Helga Ask was built in 1991 by the Viking Museum in Roskilde, Denmark, and is regularly sailed for museum patrons. Our keel was made from a live white ash tree. White ash because the grain is very straight on white ash, and live so it was bendable, so we could bend it into the shape needed for the keel. The Vikings would have made their keels out of oak. The Vikings had to rive the trees in this way because there were no sawmills, so this was the only way of getting a piece of wood the right size.
This is a nice straight part of it here, so that could be the bottom of the keel.
We used a piece of wood from near the bark, so it was sapwood and was very easy to bend.
Look, we split the pith in half for the entire length.
Almost, yeah.
Okay.
Because of the straight grain of the white ash, the wood split very well. We used a hatchet, a draw knife, a jack plane, and a power planer to shape the keel. We used a scale printout of the boat so we could bend the keel to the right shape. So the planks can get attached, and this is what we're going to cut out, and so you can see we added a lot on there. We then cut them to the right shape and tapered both the bow and stern. I traced the plan of each of the ribs onto a 1/4-inch thick sheet of basswood, and my father then cut them out. And I shaped them using the Dremel tool. I then used several different grits of sandpaper on each of the ribs to do a little bit of shaping and to smooth them. A channel was carved into the keel to fit the strakes before the ribs were attached. Here we have the rib with super glue on it. In our boat, the ribs were attached using super glue, although in the authentic they would have been nailed to the keel. The ribs will determine the shape of the hull. Then we added the planks, aka the strakes. The Vikings would have added the first few strakes before adding the ribs. We added the ribs before the strakes, so the ribs would determine the shape of the hull. Each strake was made from 3 or 4 pieces from bow to stern, each of which had to be individually shaped. It seems like a lot of clamps, but it was important to get a continuous glue seam along the edge of each strake. The strakes were shaped and attached over the course of about a month. After all of the strakes and thwarts were attached, we gave the boat a coat of stain. We also oiled the boat. Due to the lightweight construction of the Viking ships, the mast step was required to spread out the force from the push of the mast. This is the mast step of a large Viking warship, and this is the mast step for my model Viking ship, both of which are made out of oak. I shaped the mast step using the Dremel sanding tool. The mast step was then fastened into the boat. For the mast and boom, we used the wood of a small dead white pine tree that we cut down. On the Viking ships, pine would have been used for the mast and boom because it's a very light wood and they didn't want their ships to become top-heavy.
This is a dramatization and may or may not reflect the actual events that occurred.
Timber! The bottom of the mast is shaped to fit in the mast step. The boom could be raised and lowered to raise and lower the sail. The shields were shaped using the belt sander and then 4 different grits of hand sandpaper. The shields were made out of 4 different kinds of wood: basswood, walnut, cherry, and mahogany, which were then stained in 2 different ways each, resulting in 8 different colors of shields. Before staining the shields, I glued on the bumps in the center. The shields would rest on the shield rail, where the bumps would hold them in. The Viking ships could be sailed, but also could be rowed. In this clip, Kirk Douglas finds an alternative use for oars. I shaped the oars using the belt sander and then several different grits of hand sandpaper. I also stained and oiled the oars. Making the dragon head was my favorite part of the Viking boat. It is made of black cherry, and it is a replica of the dragon head on the Helga Ask. The dragon head was used to scare away the evil spirits of the sea, but was detachable, so when returning to port it could be detached, as to not scare away the good spirits of the land. The dragon tail is also made of cherry, and is modeled off of the tail on the Helga Ask. Before I did this inquiry, all I knew about the Viking is that they were those people who lived somewhere in Europe with the dragon heads on their boats and the helmets with horns. Now I know a lot more about them, and I also know that those things aren't even always true. The dragon heads were detachable, and the Vikings only very rarely, it seems, had those helmets.